I don't know where to start with this. Me, the mob, and the music. Wow. Who do we want to talk about first?
Provocative, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, actually. And me being you, Tommy James, the mob. Wow. And the music, which is what this whole thing was about, right?
Right,
When did that start for you, the music thing?
Well, it actually started when I was 4 years old. I started playing a ukulele, and and with an Arthur Godfrey tuner on it, you know.
Arthur Godfrey.
And when I was 9 years old, I got my first acoustic guitar, and I begged my mom for it and got it. Saw Elvis on the first Ed Sullivan show, and you know, rock and roll suddenly became a job opportunity. So
Yeah.
I basically, all I ever wanted to do really was play rock and roll. It's all I ever wanted to be, was one of those rock and roll guys. And the next year I got my first electric guitar and I was 10. Started my first band when I was 12. I don't know why somebody didn't send me to my room.
Where was this? Which
This
part?
was in Niles, Michigan, my hometown.
Yeah.
And I basically started a little cover band right there. We played for the variety show in 7th grade. And so we got such a great reception, actually, from my schoolmates that we kept the band together and started playing, you know, VFW halls and any place that would have us, you know. And finally, we had 2 little label deals while I was still in high school. One was with an outfit called Northway Sound, and the other was with a little label called Snap Records that was owned by the local morning man disc jockey from WNIL. And I had a job at the Spin It record shop in Niles, so I got a real education with the trade papers. And, you know, God really, when I look at the whole thing, the tapestry, really gave me an amazing education. Things I'm still using today that I learned in that record shop when I was 14, 15.
When was the first big thing to break through for you?
Well, I recorded Hanky Panky, my first, what became ultimately my first hit record, in 1964. I was a junior in high school, and we recorded it on this little label, Snap Records, for local disc jockey. And he pressed records, and it came out, and it was sort of a half a local hit. And we felt real good, but the record didn't get any airplay. So we basically, the record, you know, it was a big hit in about 4 square blocks and then died. So I graduated from high school the next year in '65 and took my band on the road, and we went through Rush Street in Chicago, and we got a booking agent and went up through the Midwest. And right in the middle of my 2 weeks in Janesville, Wisconsin, in the spring of '66, the club goes belly up. And the IRS shuts them down. And we were very lucky to get our equipment out of there. But that's how the good Lord would work it, because I had to go back to Niles feeling very rejected and very down. And at that very moment when I got home, I got a call that changed my life. I got a call from Fenway Distributors in Pittsburgh that Hanky Panky, this record I had recorded 2 years earlier, was sitting at #1.
Somebody dug it up?
Dug it up out of a record cemetery, you know, put it on the air, and it actually broke out of teen dance clubs, and they bootlegged it, sold 80,000 of them in 10 days, and we were sitting at #1. Only in America.
Wow.
Only in America. And the longer I'm in this business, the more I realize what a trillion-to-1 shot that was. And so I couldn't put the original band back together. This would have been about April of '66. So I went to Pittsburgh with the original producer, Jack Douglas, and I did local television and, you know, did the local media. Grabbed the first bar band I could find, which was a really great group called the Raconteurs that were playing locally in Pittsburgh, to be the Shondells, because that was the name that was on the record. So a week later, we headed for New York and wanted to sell the master to anybody that would take us, basically. Yeah. So we got to New York and got a yes from everybody. I'm talking Epic, Columbia, RCA, Atlantic, Kamasutra, remember Kamasutra Records, and Laurie Records. And the last place they took the record to was Roulette Records. And so we're just feeling great because everybody gave us a thumbs up. And So I go to bed that night in New York just feeling terrific, and the next morning, one by one, all the record companies call up and say, listen, we got to pass. And I said, what do you mean you got to pass? Well, I thought we had a deal. And finally, Jerry Wexler at Atlantic levels with us and tells us, well, if you want to know the truth, Morris Levy from Roulette Records called up all the record companies and said, this is my record.
Whoa.
And
with that tone,
everybody down.
that attitude.
Yes. And so I said, you know, this is kind of scary, actually. And so that's how we ended up on Roulette Records.
Well, Morris Levy was known in the industry as what, the Godfather?
The Godfather of the record business.
Wow.
And
he
was
really
aptly
was.
named, too.
Yes,
Yes.
really. And so that was where you ended up, at that label.
That's true.
And what happened to the song?
Well, the song,
record.
of course, they made into the #1 record of 1960, the summer of '66. They released Hanky Panky. It went #1 everywhere in the free world. It was a miracle for us because it really created an amazing environment for us to have a career in. And so I was very thrilled with that. What we didn't know, and we learned incrementally, is that Roulette, in addition to being a functioning record label, and a good one, was also a front for the Genovese crime family in New York.
So they owned you and you didn't know it?
Well, they owned the record.
Yeah, then they owned you, buddy.
So this was real. This made life really interesting.
Wow.
And I haven't been able to tell this story. This is a story I've been waiting to tell for a very long time because I felt that I really had to wait till the last of what I called the Roulette regulars passed on.
Yeah, well, it might get
Some-
a little nervous out
Yes.
there.
Some of these guys were still walking around, and you know, it's not like I was going to tell anything that really hadn't been known, but nobody knew it from this angle.
Right.
And so, you know.
So, okay, that's happening behind the scenes. Out in front of the whole world, this record is now exploded. You've got a #1 record. What did that do to you guys? What did it do to you?
It felt like we were in the middle of a tornado, particularly the group, because they came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
They really came out of nowhere. But I must say that the group and I became like brothers. We were, you know, great friends, and I have always felt like, you know, that was the group I was supposed to be with. So they went through this tortuous relationship with me, and you know, about 2/3 of the book is telling this story of how we incrementally learned who we were rubbing shoulders with, and also how we dealt with that, because boy, did we have to walk on eggshells.
How many records did that sell, that first one, Hanky Panky?
Well, the first one did about 3 million.
3 million?
Yeah.
First one out of the chute.
And back then, remember that a 45, a single, was really kind of the measure of all things. So it was, you know, you didn't really have an album until you came with the second single.
And did you have a follow-up in mind? Or?
Yeah, we really didn't know what we were doing. I mean, we ended up with a follow-up, but at that moment when the thing was exploding, we were just sort of dumbfounded by it.
Yeah. So you were more than one-hit wonders then. You had a hit after that.
Absolutely. We had 22 more, actually.
Really?
Yes,
Did you? 22?
23 gold singles, 9 gold and platinum albums, and we did about 110 million records.
Good. We'll rattle off some of the titles for everybody who doesn't know.
Hanky Panky, Say I Am, I Think We're Alone Now, Mirage, Getting Together, Moni Moni,
Crystal Blue Persuasion, Crimson and Clover.
Sweet Cherry Wine, Ball of Fire, Dragging the Line, 3 times
Good
in a row.
grief.
Well, honestly, this is a business that maybe gives you 2 or 3 years, and we've been so blessed to be doing this for, you know, 44 years now.
Now here's a major hook of something that unfortunately, you knew. All of this is going on, and you're not collecting penny one in royalties.
That's very true.
That they're ripping you off.
Yeah. Well, if we had been with one of the big labels, the corporate labels that wanted us, we would have probably been handed to a producer. We would have been lost in the numbers, and especially with a record like Hanky Panky, we would have been one-hit wonders, and that would have been it. Because we were at Roulette, they actually needed us. You know, they hadn't had a hit since really the Essex from back in '63, And so it had been almost 3 years, the better part of 3 years since they'd had a major hit. And so they allowed us to morph into whatever we could become. They left us alone in the studio. We spent a lot of money in the studio. We just couldn't get royalties. And that, of course, became the issue. Now, we were making money from our concert tours, and we were making money from commercials and BMI and things like that. So it wasn't like we were destitute. But the main monies, of course, were record royalties and writing royalties, which we just weren't getting. I describe it as trying to take a bone from a Doberman. I mean, it just wasn't going to happen. And, of course, you weren't just dealing with Morris. You were dealing with the people who were behind Morris. So.
And this went on for how many years?
Almost 9.
And in the middle of all this, too, you had a young woman who got pregnant.
Yes, my first wife. Sure.
First wife, and a child from that, a young son.
Right. 18 years old. My senior year in high school was real interesting.
Like,
yes.
like you're a kid.
Yeah.
So it's a kid having a baby.
Yeah.
And then, but you're running all over the country, and hit after hit after hit. Then you, like it's happened to so many, here comes the booze and the alcohol
and the pills
and everything else.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's true. And my life quickly became, get the next single ready, get the next project ready. And I realized I was on my own in this because, Roulette was not a bowl of creativity. I mean, they had the money.
Right.
They could make things happen, but it was up to me to put the production team together and to come up with the next record. So the pressure and just the lifestyle, plus I am an alcoholic, and that is a fact. I didn't know that till years later, but I mean, the bottom line was that I just real quickly fell into pills and booze, uppers and downers, and that was just part of my life right then.
You lost the marriage through it, right?
I sure did. And so that just became our way of life. In fact, the funny part is that nobody really thought too much about it. It wasn't like people were saying, oh, you're doing pills. It was like, let's get the next record ready. What do you need? So truthfully, it's amazing how quickly and easily you start doing that stuff. And when you're that age, you have no fear of chemicals. And you
invincible.
No.
And in the middle of all of this, was there any time you ever sat and said, okay, I've got all this going on around me, all the great success with records, but not only did you lose that marriage, you lost a subsequent marriage, you were married the second time.
That's right.
Is there ever a time when you're sitting in a hotel room and going, I'm fooling myself?
Oh, you better believe it. You better believe it. In fact, that kind of brings me to my first real experience with the Lord. I was brought up Catholic. I was an altar boy for about 12 minutes. I knew I loved God, but I was a biblical illiterate, and I really didn't know the Old Testament from the New Testament, and I really was just sort of floundering. And I'll never forget one night. You talk about God meeting you where you live. One night I'm playing a gig in Pennsylvania. This is late '66. And it was 3 a.m. and we had taken uppers that night, and we had been writing, and I'm wide awake, everybody else is in bed. So I'm twiddling my thumbs, and I'm looking around the room, and I was in a Holiday Inn, and I opened a desk drawer, and there's a Gideon Bible. And I just took a hold of it. It felt real friendly, and but I didn't know where to start, so I just went, and I just went, God, talk to me somewhere.
You said that literally.
I did, and it was just a very personal thing.
Right.
And so I opened it up, and I went to Ezekiah. It was Ezekiel. And at the time, I'm a real UFO nut. I mean, I'm fascinated with UFOs. So I open up Ezekiel, and I read the greatest UFO story in history.
Ezekiel 1 and the chariot and the lights
yes.
and the wheels and the whole thing.
Exactly. And I was just blown away because I knew that was God talking to me. First of all, that was a 1 in a million shot that I was going to land right there, and that I had just been talking about this with somebody before, and I was just so totally into this subject. I knew that it was him saying, "Here's, you want a UFO story time? Here's one." Truly, and I knew that he spoke to me, and it really changed me. God was real. Suddenly, he was in the now.
What did you do with that?
Well, I stole the Bible.
Oh, God.
That's the first thing I did. Took me years before I knew that they wanted you to take the Bible. I didn't know that, so I felt very guilty about it and tucked it away in my suitcase and took it home. So I'm sort of sporadically reading my Bible, but I really have no method of reading. I'm just reading wherever I read. And it was good, but it wasn't great. So about 4 months later, I'm at my apartment in New York, and I'm writing. And Billy Graham is having a crusade at Shea Stadium. And Channel 9 is broadcasting every night. So I started watching it. And I really had a hunger for God. And I didn't, I wouldn't have known that was the way to describe it, but I was really feeling that. And I started listening, and I put the guitar down and listened to the whole thing, and that was really great. And the next night I did the same thing. And Wednesday night he gave one of the most incredible teachings on why Jesus came. I had never heard it put that beautifully and simply before. I'd heard a lot of theology, but I never heard it quite like that. And I knew I'd heard the truth. And I've often described it as a fork hitting a crystal goblet, just that pure tone. And it rang something in me. I knew I heard the truth. And I went up to the TV. I'm sure I did, retinal damage. I went about this close, put my nose on the set and my hand. And when he gave the invitation, and I got saved that night.
Whoa.
This was in the spring of '67. So I knew that God was talking to me. And I knew that I was responding to the Holy Spirit, and I knew a lot of things that really I had no business knowing but I knew.
It's coming as almost like revelation to you.
True.
How did it affect your life? Did it change anything?
Well, unfortunately, I kept popping pills, and I kept, basically living the lifestyle I was, but I was different. And God had broken through that stuff, and there were no believers in my life at the time. Not at the record company. I was really by myself in this, and there wasn't much on television. One of the things I was very thankful for was when the 700 Club came on.
Really?
Because up until that time, there was really nothing regular every day on television that you could, tie a rope around. It was, you had to catch it wherever you could catch it,
Yeah, and this is not a paid commercial announcement.
No, I'm very serious about that.
Yeah.
The 700 Club has been a big part of my Christian growth, and I mean that sincerely.
Yeah. So you went on with the records?
Yes,
with the hits?
this was '67, and it's funny. Everybody, and I told a couple of the members of the band who totally got it. Yeah. And they became Christians too. The whole band ended up getting saved, by the way.
My goodness.
The whole band.
All in their own way with God.
And not quite all at the same time, but within a very short period of time, really a couple of years. And I've always been very grateful for that, and we're still best friends to this very day. As a matter of fact, we're back in the studio again together. But we then, to answer your question, we then came, I Think We're Alone Now, and Mirage, and just a whole slew of records for us. And then we began, really after Moni Moni, we began producing our own product, and that really was a monumental moment.
So how did this affect your relationship with Morris Levy, with Roulette Records, and with the boys in the band, the other guys, the mob guys?
True enough. This was a really crazy story because the duplicity, the double-mindedness, the crazy schizophrenic relationship that I was, life that I was leading, quite literally talking to Jesus on one hand and talking to Morris on the other. It was nuts. And I don't know why the Lord chose to bless me through these people, but He did. And
Two mob guys, come on. I mean,
it's
weird.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah, it's really nuts.
But it just shows you that God is everywhere and has His kids everywhere, and uses situations in the way He chooses. Things you would never in a million years think would be a blessing turned out to be.
I mean, you were working with guys that one day you'd be sitting talking with them, the next day they were taken out.
True enough.
I mean, you were surrounded by violence,
Yes.
baseball bats side of people's heads, guns, all the bad stories.
I must say that up at Roulette, things were dicey, but they were also, you know, the strange part about it is that this was like the ultimate odd couple story.
Yeah.
Morris and I dealing with each other, and the weird thing was it worked as far as making records. We creatively couldn't have gone to a better place as far as, you know, creating a rock and roll career. But there was this incredible reality I had to deal with. You know, do I break things up because we're not getting paid?
He owed you about what, $30, $40 million?
Before it ended up, our accountant calculated somewhere between $30 and $40 million that we just flat out didn't get. This was not only from royalties, but it was for mechanicals on the songwriting plus licensing deals all over the world. But on the other hand, there's always a but and a comma. If I'd have had that money right then with the lifestyle I was leading, I would have probably destroyed myself. It wasn't until I left Roulette in '74. We had some other hits on some other labels, but basically Morris and I kept a relationship. We would talk to each other. And my publishing stayed there, by the way, till 1979. And Morris, by the 80s, incidentally, by '86, I went to the Betty Ford Center, and it was one of the most wonderful experiences of my life.
To dry out from the pills,
everything,
the
got
booze.
rid of everything. And I must say that when I played my first gig after, you know, being high on something for 25 years, every time I would play, it was the most liberating experience in the world. It was incredible. They told me at the Betty Ford Center, I said, come on, what do I do? They said, well, we suggest that you start off playing smaller venues and, you know, kind of work your way back. I said, fine. The first gig I took was Madison Square Garden. So it was on the line. So one of my counselors actually flew in at his own expense to be with me that night. I'll never forget that. This was March of '87. And I got up on stage and I went into dragging the line and I go, making a live, and my knees are weak. By the third song, I'm having a ball.
Wow.
And it was so incredible to have that back and forth with the audience immediately. Without going through the acting of raising your right, say, okay, now it's time to smile and raise your left hand.
Right.
And it was like somebody turned the color knob on the TV set, and it was just the most incredible feeling. That demon was dead.
Wow.
And
also simultaneously with this, you had met another woman.
Yes.
Well, here we go again.
The love of my life.
And you've been married how long now to?
38 years.
Wow. So that
Since
one's
1972, actually, yeah.
Yeah. So life really did turn around for you.
Oh, it sure did. And of course, one of the main things was I had to stop with the chemicals and the smoking and the booze and all that. That had to stop.
With all this that's happened now, and did Mars take his hooks out of you? Did he still in some way own you emotionally?
Well, it was very interesting. At that very moment that I went to the Ford Center, Morris got arrested. He had purchased Strawberries, the record chain, and his behavior caught up with him, and he was arrested in 1986, just at the moment that I went to the Betty Ford Center.
Wow.
And he was brought up on charges of racketeering, and he ended up the following year getting a 10-year prison sentence. And he basically then unloaded Roulette and Big 7 Music, the publishing, and he sold it to EMI and to Warner Brothers and Rhino. And when he did, of course, then we started getting paid in earnest. And so, as you can see, all of these things coalesced. And He had offered me a label. This is back in '85, and I'm so glad I didn't take it. But at any rate, everything kind of came together at once. Morris not being an issue anymore, combined with being completely sober, and all of these things, you know, you can call them coincidences if you want to, but I know better. And basically what happened from that point on was Morris contracted cancer. I think despite the feds, actually, and never served a day. He died before he went to prison.
Is that right?
Yeah. Morris and my father died the same year of the same thing. It was just quite amazing.
Did you have any contact with Morris at all before he died?
Morris died in May of 1990, and we were just leaving for a concert in Chicago. I had just come with a brand new album called Hi-Fi on Aegis Records. And I hadn't done a studio album in 10 years, and this was really a big deal. So my manager and the record company president were with me. We were all going to Chicago to open up the tour. And just as I'm leaving the house, I get a call from Morris's accountant, who happened to be my accountant, saying, Morris is asking for you. And if you want to see me, you better get up here right away. He was in Ghent, New York at his farm. And I said, oh my God, I'm leaving. I'll be up there tomorrow morning. So I did the show in Chicago, and I was planning on coming right back and going up, and he died that night.
Whoa.
And I never got a chance to say goodbye to him. So the last scene of the book and the movie will be the sort of imaginary conversation I'm having.
When you reflect on all this, Tommy, do you see the invisible hand guiding your life?
Oh.
The events, everything is
Without
transpired.
a doubt.
That the fact is that you're sitting here right now talking to me.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle. What I'm saying is that the Lord has not only directed my path, but He's been my shepherd all my life. All my life. He's been kind to me. He's been generous to me. But He's also let me know that it's Him. You know, so that there was no mistaking it. He's let me know through little clusters of things that could only be Him. All my life, it's been like I said in the book how when I needed the next stone, it was always there, and I always knew where it came from. All I can say is that now, more than ever, when I'm appearing somewhere, I get to throw little seeds out there. I'll say, at the end of Sweet Cherry Wine, which is about the blood of Jesus anyway, I always say, keep looking up, Jesus is coming. Because it's true, number one, but also you wouldn't believe that little seed that goes out there after the show when we're signing autographs and stuff, how many people come up to me and say they heard that and ask me specifically if I'm a Christian and how long I've been a Christian. I get to talk about Jesus.
And another one of your songs, Crystal Blue Persuasion.
Yeah, that was about becoming a Christian. Yeah. People say, was that about drugs? I said, no, it was about Jesus.
Where you're going, what's the immediate future? What do you see?
Sure. Well, there's going to be a movie in about 18 months of this, and then a Broadway show. And I'm just blown away by it. You have no idea, because this is quite obviously the hand of the Lord. And how ironic that telling this story is going to be the biggest project I've ever been involved in, ever in my life. Yeah. And it's going to be me recounting my walk with Jesus and what that led me to. I'm just blown away by that.
I think we all are. Me, the mob, the music. So me and the music is still with us.
Oh yeah, we're touring. By the way, we're all over the United States every year, and if somebody would like to come and check us out, it's just come to our website, just TommyJames.com, and we'll fix you up.
The mob's no longer part of this
no,
equation.
No.
And you live through
I'd have made a lousy mobster anyway.